Okay, so we have looked at pollution there in our last slide. So what we're going to look at is how we actually measure pollution, and the way in which pollution is measured is by biological oxygen demand, or BOD. BOD is defined as the amount of dissolved oxygen consumed. So it's the amount that's used up by biological action, and biological action is the actions of living things. And our sample has to be kept at 20 degrees Celsius in the dark for 5 days. You need to know those 3 conditions for a definition. We're going to look at a little bit of this in more detail, particularly with our 3 conditions. So 20 degrees, why? So our 6th years have done polarity, so you can listen for the next couple of seconds. 5th years, we haven't this done already. So oxygen is non-polar. Remember my rule for polarity: like dissolves like. So oxygen is non-polar, so its solubility in water, which is going to be polar, is quite low, okay? And from our junior cycle, we know that as we increase the temperature, we also increase the solubility. So that's why we have it at 20 degrees Celsius. Secondly, then, the rate of microbial actions, and hence the amount of oxygen that these actions are going to consume, is dependent on temperature. We know that from our chapter on rates. Increasing the temperature increases our rate. Why then do we have to keep it in the dark? Remember, photosynthesis is a natural process that occurs in light. If I do not have light, I will not have photosynthesis taking place. When I have photosynthesis occurring, it produces glucose, but it also produces oxygen. So if I did not keep this in the dark, my photosynthesis would replace the oxygen that has been used up with the oxygen from photosynthesis. So it would give me an inaccurate result. Next then is for 5 days. And the reason why we have to keep it for 5 days is to ensure the microorganisms adjust to their environment. Okay. The second reason is that it allows sufficient time for complete breakdown of wastes to occur. Now, just a very important point to remember here. I want dissolved oxygen, and I need dissolved oxygen present in my water supplies, my rivers, my oceans, my streams. Remember, my fish depend on that dissolved oxygen in order to be able to breathe. So if I have high levels of dissolved oxygen, I'm going to have a healthy water sample. But if I have a lot of my dissolved oxygen here consumed, that means there's a lot less oxygen that's present in my water supply or sample. So the greater my BOD, the amount of dissolved oxygen, so the higher the dissolved oxygen, or the higher dissolved oxygen consumed, so the higher the BOD, we're going to have high levels of pollution. If I have high levels of pollution, that means in my water supplies, I'm going to have very low levels of dissolved oxygen, again, undesirable. We're kind of getting onto the experiment here now, and it's called a Winkler titration, Winkler, and that's used to determine the amount of dissolved oxygen and BOD in our sample. If we do have a very polluted sample of water, we must dilute it with well-oxygenated distilled water, okay? What you'd generally do is you'd fill half of it with your water sample and then the other half with this well-oxygenated distilled water. How you do that, how you make it well-oxygenated, is you'd shake it vigorously. If my sample is extremely polluted, and if I don't do this, all my dissolved oxygen may be used up before the end of the 5-day test period. So that would mean, I don't know, it could have, all the dissolved oxygen could have been used after day 1, or it could have been used after day 5. So it basically renders my last result, my final testing result, invalid. Okay, just when we do this, we obviously have to take this dilution factor into account as well. And I will be coming back to doing a few sample calculations with you. Just to note, You cannot use any type of treated or chlorinated water for this experiment. So any type of tap water that comes into the home. The reason why is because the chlorine might act as the oxidizing agent instead of the oxygen, okay, and react with our potassium iodide. Obviously, then that will give us an inaccurate result. So just a point to note there.